My name is Evelyn Cross, and for most of my life, I believed that hard work and loyalty were enough. I gave everything to Helios Corp. For 7 long years, I worked tirelessly, climbing the ranks from an entry-level analyst to a senior executive. Every late night, every weekend spent perfecting presentations, every personal sacrifice. I did it all because I trusted the system. I trusted people like Vanessa Blythe. Vanessa was the vice president and, at one time, my closest friend and mentor. We spent years side by side, navigating corporate politics and delivering results. She called me her work sister, and I believed we had each other's backs. So when the CEO announced he would be retiring and the position would open up, I thought I had a real chance. I was the obvious choice, proven, reliable, and respected. But nothing prepared me for what came next. It started subtly. Whispers in meetings, cold glances in the break room. Vanessa suddenly stopped inviting me to executive lunches or copying me on important emails. I brushed it off, assuming she was stressed about the leadership transition. Then came the bombshell. On a Monday morning, I was summoned to an emergency board meeting. The room felt colder than usual. Faces I had once seen as allies were stone cold. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. "Evelyn," she began, her voice devoid of the warmth I once knew. "There have been serious allegations made against you." My heart raced. "What allegations?" I asked, confused and nervous. A manila folder slid across the table toward me. Inside were documents, spreadsheets, emails, reports, all doctored to suggest I had been embezzling funds. "This is absurd," I protested, my voice shaky. "I would never—" "The evidence is overwhelming," Vanessa interrupted, her eyes sharp as knives. "The board has decided to suspend you effective immediately pending investigation." I looked around, searching for support, but no one met my gaze. The people I had mentored, collaborated with, even celebrated birthdays and weddings with, now looked at me like I was a criminal. Security escorted me out of the building within the hour. My access was revoked, my belongings boxed up like I was already convicted. News spread fast. By the afternoon, industry contacts had cut ties. Recruiters stopped calling, friends stopped texting. My reputation, built carefully over years, crumbled in mere hours. The betrayal stung deeper than I could express. Vanessa never returned my calls. She had used me, then discarded me the moment I became a threat to her ambitions. Alone in my small apartment, I stared at the ceiling that night, numb with rage and disbelief. How could someone I trusted so completely stab me in the back so ruthlessly? The pain morphed into something darker. That night, I made a vow, not only to clear my name, but to make Vanessa and everyone involved pay. They had pushed me down, but I would rise again. Only this time, I would make sure they would never recover from the fall I was about to deliver. The days that followed felt like drowning. Every morning, I woke up hoping it was all a nightmare, but reality hit hard. I was jobless, branded a thief, and abandoned by those I once trusted. Headlines across financial news sites screamed my disgrace. Helios executive suspended over fraud allegations. My phone, once buzzing nonstop, fell silent. Invitations dried up. Friends who once begged me for career advice now ghosted me. Even my own family looked at me differently, unsure whether to believe me or the headlines. I spent weeks curled up in my tiny apartment, eating whatever instant meals I could afford. Rent piled up. But worse than the financial ruin was the humiliation. Vanessa had won. She had not only taken my career, but destroyed my identity. At least that's what she thought. One evening, as I sat in the dark, staring blankly at my ceiling, a shift happened inside me. Self-pity morphed into anger. Anger into resolve. They thought I was done? No, this was only the beginning. I spent the next year in complete silence, disappearing from every social circle I knew. I cut unnecessary expenses, sold off everything of value, and poured every penny I had into self-education and research. I devoured books about fintech, artificial intelligence and finance, and emerging global markets. I reconnected discreetly with ex-colleagues who had left Helios for better pastures. Through them, I learned the real state of Helios post-scandal. Cracks were forming. Without my expertise, projects were stalling. Vanessa may have removed me from the game, but she couldn't replicate my skill. Still, I didn't want revenge fueled by desperation. I wanted it calculated. That's when I founded Nova Edge. Officially, it was a small fintech startup focused on democratizing access to capital for small businesses. Unofficially, it was my ticket back to the top. Through Nova Edge, I built tools that streamlined loans, cut costs, and provided transparency that Helios, still clinging to outdated models, couldn't offer. Within 18 months, we went from a nobody in the market to a disruptive force. Clients began switching over. Investors took notice. Revenue skyrocketed. Meanwhile, Helios was bleeding. Vanessa's mismanagement became evident. Internal scandals, poor decision-making, and talent drain ate away at their reputation. The board's faith in her was crumbling. Still, no one suspected I was behind Nova Edge. I used shell companies and silent partners to hide my growing empire. But my true play hadn't even begun. I started acquiring Helios shares slowly, methodically, through various fronts. Each transaction so small it flew under the radar. By the end of the second year, I quietly held nearly 40% of the company. Vanessa had no clue. She still played the queen, hosting lavish board meetings and pretending everything was under control. Meanwhile, I watched like a predator in the dark, waiting for her to let her guard down. By the third year, Helios's share price plummeted. Investors panicked. The market smelled blood. That's when I struck. I coordinated with my partners to initiate a buying frenzy, snapping up shares at dirt-cheap prices. Within weeks, my total holdings surpassed 60%. I now controlled the company. The board, desperate and disillusioned with Vanessa, scheduled an emergency meeting. Invitations were sent, including one to the person they had forgotten entirely, me. When I walked into that boardroom 3 years after they had thrown me out, like garbage, jaws dropped. Vanessa went pale. Her voice trembled as she stammered, "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" I smiled coldly. I believe the correct term is majority shareholder. I own this company now. Gasps filled the room. Vanessa tried to argue, but no one backed her. The very people who once sided with her were now groveling before me. "You can't do this," she hissed. I leaned in, my voice soft but deadly. "Oh, Vanessa, I can, and I will." With a swift vote, backed by my controlling interest, Vanessa was removed as CEO on the spot. She was escorted out of the same building she once ruled, humiliated before all. But I wasn't done yet. I revealed the files I had painstakingly gathered over the years, proof of how Vanessa and her inner circle had falsified evidence to destroy me. The board was stunned. Legal action against Vanessa was inevitable. I watched, emotionless, as the woman who had tried to end me was led away in tears. In that moment, the years of pain, the loneliness, the betrayal, all of it felt worth it. I didn't just take my career back. I took everything from them, leaving them in ruins. But I wasn't satisfied with revenge alone. Helios would now be reborn under my rule. The empire that cast me out would become my kingdom. And as I took my seat at the head of the table, one thought echoed in my mind. Never again would anyone underestimate Evelyn Cross. The day Vanessa Blythe was dragged out of Helios headquarters marked the end of her reign. But for me, it was only the beginning. Power, I realized, was intoxicating. For years, I had been on the receiving end of humiliation, betrayal, and deceit. But now I was the one sitting on the throne. The board, visibly shaken, tried to play nice. They congratulated me, called me a visionary, pretended to be loyal. I knew better. They were cowards, the same people who had watched silently as Vanessa stabbed me in the back. Their sudden change of tone disgusted me, but I played along, for now. Cleaning house had to be strategic. I spent my first weeks as CEO reviewing everything: internal emails, financial reports, even private correspondences. I needed to know who had supported Vanessa's coup 3 years ago. It didn't take long to build my list. There were 5 key players who had orchestrated my downfall alongside Vanessa. They thought they were safe now, hidden behind years of fake smiles and polite handshakes. But I saw through them. They were parasites, feeding off the company, covering their tracks. I decided they wouldn't go quietly. One by one, I set traps. First was Marcus Lee, the former CFO. He had always been Vanessa's right-hand man in manipulating financial records. Conveniently, Marcus was now involved in a suspicious insider trading scheme. My team discreetly gathered irrefutable proof. At the next executive meeting, I revealed everything. His face turned ghostly as security walked him out in front of everyone. No severance, no farewell party, just shame. Next came Karen Whitmore, the HR director. She had fast-tracked Vanessa's allies into key positions while freezing my promotions back then. I found emails where she openly mocked me, calling me too soft to be a leader. Using a reorganization initiative, I eliminated her entire department. Karen was escorted out under the guise of restructuring, her career in ruins. The dominoes continued to fall. Eric Donnelly, the head of operations, was next. He had quietly allowed Vanessa to funnel money into her personal projects. A sudden performance review revealed catastrophic mismanagement. Eric was terminated immediately and sued for negligence. Within months, all 5 of my enemies were gone. Not with mercy or quiet goodbyes, but with public disgrace. I made sure the entire company saw how betrayal was rewarded. But revenge wasn't just about individual takedowns. It was about rebuilding Helios into something better. Something mine. I dismantled every toxic structure Vanessa had put in place. I promoted fresh, hungry talent who valued integrity over politics. I rebranded Helios as a company that valued transparency and innovation. Stocks soared. Media hailed my return from the ashes. Investors flooded in. My victory was complete. Or so I thought. Late one night, while reviewing documents in my office, a strange email came through. No sender, no subject. Just one line. Enjoy your throne while it lasts. You forgot something. My stomach tightened. Despite everything, someone was still out there. Someone I hadn't identified yet. I launched a secret internal audit, pushing my security team to investigate every corner of Helios. Days turned into weeks, and frustration grew. Whoever sent that message was a ghost. That was until a name resurfaced, Rachel Lively, my former assistant. 3 years ago, she had been a quiet, obedient employee. I barely noticed her then. But after my scandal, she had left Helios quietly. Now she worked for a rival firm, and digging deeper, I found something chilling. Rachel was Vanessa's cousin, a relative who had kept her distance publicly, but stayed in the shadows. Suddenly, everything made sense. Vanessa's plan hadn't ended with her removal. Rachel had been left behind, quietly sabotaging systems and feeding information to outside competitors. Rage boiled inside me. I couldn't believe I had overlooked her. But this wasn't panic, it was opportunity. I devised a plan. I invited Rachel back under the pretense of consulting on Helios' digital transition. She accepted, likely thinking she was untouchable. Over the next few weeks, I fed her false information, setting up fake project launches and phantom deals. Predictably, these details leaked almost instantly to her company. Enough was enough. At a massive shareholder conference with media present, I dropped the bombshell. Screens lit up with evidence: emails, financial transactions, security footage. Rachel's face drained of color as her betrayal unfolded publicly. Her employer fired her on the spot. Legal action followed. In that moment, I realized true revenge wasn't just about toppling enemies. It was about making them watch as you rose higher than they could ever dream. Rachel was nothing more than the final loose thread. Once she was gone, the tapestry of my revenge was complete. I had crushed Vanessa's legacy, destroyed her loyalists, and rebuilt Helios into a global powerhouse. But as I stood in my office, that night, staring out at the city skyline, I didn't feel joy, just emptiness. Victory was mine, yes. But at what cost? Still, one thing was certain. No one would ever dare cross Evelyn Cross again, not in this lifetime. With Rachel exposed and eliminated, Helios was finally free of Vanessa's poisonous legacy. The air felt different. Employees no longer whispered in fear or clung to alliances. They looked at me, truly looked, and saw not the victim they once pitied, but the ruler they now respected and perhaps feared. I had become exactly what corporate predators dreamed of: calculated, unshaken, merciless when necessary. But there was still unfinished business. Revenge had consumed me for so long that when the dust finally settled, I faced a new question. What now? I didn't just want Helios to survive, I wanted it to dominate. The market had changed while we were fighting our internal wars. New players, fresh technologies, younger minds were reshaping finance faster than anyone could keep up. If I wanted Helios to rise again, I needed to evolve it into something unstoppable. That's when I made my boldest move yet. I announced the Helios Renaissance Initiative, a complete rebranding and restructuring of the company. Gone were the days of bloated middle management and bureaucratic delays. I implemented radical transparency, opening internal data to shareholders and employees alike, destroying old hierarchies and introducing an aggressive performance-based culture. Many doubted me. Investors were jittery. News outlets labeled it a desperate gamble. But I knew better. The old guard thrived on fear and manipulation. I thrived on results. Within months, efficiency skyrocketed. Helios became leaner, faster, and more profitable than ever. Employees who once feared for their jobs now raced to outperform one another, not out of fear, but ambition. Our competitors struggled to keep up. I launched new AI-driven financial products that disrupted traditional banking models. Our client list exploded. Helios was no longer just back, it was leading. The same media that once smeared my name now called me the Iron Queen of Wall Street. I didn't care about flattery. What mattered was that those who had doubted me now bent the knee. But even as I built my empire higher, paranoia lurked. Success breeds enemies. Not just the obvious ones, but opportunists, rivals, even those within your own walls. I learned to trust no one fully. Every alliance was transactional. Every smile, every handshake, calculated. My personal life became non-existent. Relationships were liabilities. Friends, gone. Family, distant. I existed for Helios now. That realization both empowered and terrified me. Power had become my oxygen, and like oxygen, too much could suffocate. Late one evening, as I sat in my glass-walled office high above the city, a storm raged. Outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating the empty floor. I was alone, surrounded by charts, projections, and glowing screens, all whispering about profits and market shares. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Had I won, or had I merely traded one prison for another? Just as that dangerous thought crept in, my assistant, Lily, buzzed in. "Ms. Cross, there's something you should see. It's urgent." I frowned, waving her in. She handed me a tablet. On the screen was a news alert. Former Helios CEO Vanessa Blythe breaks silence, claims wrongful termination and fraud conspiracy. My pulse quickened. Vanessa. She had vanished from public view after her disgrace, retreating into obscurity. Now, 3 years later, she was back, and making bold claims. In her statement, she painted herself as the scapegoat, accusing Helios, under my leadership, of manipulating evidence against her. The media, hungry for scandal, jumped on the story. Headlines erupted overnight. Investors began calling. Shareholders demanded explanations. Competitors mocked us, sensing weakness. My empire, so meticulously rebuilt, faced its first serious threat. I stared at Vanessa's smug face during her press conference replay. She was older, yes, but her eyes still burned with malice. She wasn't after redemption. She was after revenge. My revenge had triggered hers. For the first time in years, I felt a chill. This wasn't a disgraced ex-CEO throwing tantrums. Vanessa had resources, connections, and clearly, a plan. I gathered my core executive team immediately. We mapped out a strategy to counter her claims, hired top legal minds, and prepared to go nuclear if needed. Yet deep down, I knew this would not be resolved with press releases or lawsuits. Vanessa wanted war, and she knew exactly how to play dirty. Sitting alone later that night, watching the city lights blur through raindrops on the glass, I whispered to myself, If it's war she wants, it's war she'll get. I had clawed my way from ruin to rule. I had destroyed every enemy in my path. I wasn't about to let the ghost of Vanessa Blythe drag me back down. I would face her head on, even if it meant embracing the darkness completely. The hunt wasn't over. Not yet. Vanessa's return wasn't just loud, it was surgical. Within days of her press tour, regulators began sniffing around Helios again. Anonymous tips flooded financial watchdogs, questioning the legality of our restructuring, implying insider trading, and pushing narratives that painted me as ruthless and corrupt. Stockholders panicked. Helios's shares, which I had painstakingly rebuilt to record highs, began slipping. Competitors circled like vultures, whispering in the ears of our biggest clients. Internally, whispers turned into paranoia. Staff who had once worshipped me now sent resumes elsewhere. Vanessa knew exactly where to hit. She didn't attack Helios directly. She attacked its heart, its reputation, and it worked. For the first time since my return, I wasn't in control. Every night I sat in my penthouse office, eyes bloodshot from reading legal drafts and crisis management strategies, while the city below thrived, oblivious to my unraveling kingdom. The anger that had fueled my rise felt different now. It was no longer righteous, it was desperate. Vanessa's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Drag me into the mud, force me to defend myself, and exhaust me until I broke. The public, of course, loved the drama. The former Golden Girl turned Ice Queen now facing karma? Headlines sold themselves. Late-night shows mocked me. Opinion pieces speculated if I had faked my original innocence. They didn't know the truth. Vanessa did. And that's what made this worse. She wasn't after justice. She was after humiliation. I realized talking wouldn't work. PR couldn't fix this. Legal threats were pointless. Vanessa wanted me destroyed emotionally before professionally. So I decided to change the rules of the game. If she thrived in chaos, I would give her more than she could handle. I secretly reached out to people from her past, old business partners, disgruntled ex-employees, the cousin she had disowned over a family inheritance dispute. It wasn't hard to find skeletons. Vanessa had been ruthless long before she turned on me. Over the next few weeks, my team and I assembled a dossier so explosive that even I was stunned. Bribery, backdoor deals, sabotaging rival firms, even affairs with board members back in her Helios days to manipulate votes. This wasn't corporate rivalry anymore. This was annihilation. I waited until the annual Global Finance Summit, where Vanessa was scheduled, to give a keynote about integrity in leadership. It was the perfect stage. As she stood on stage, charming the crowd with her fake humility, my team executed the plan. Journalists received encrypted emails. Screens around the venue lit up with headlines exposing her past crimes. News feeds exploded in real time. Vanessa's confident smile faltered as phones buzzed and whispers filled the room. She tried to continue, but no one listened. By the end of the day, her name was poison. Brands severed ties. Her speaking engagements were canceled. The regulatory authorities who once entertained her claims now opened fresh investigations against her. I didn't stop there. I released personal messages she had sent to Rachel Lively, mocking regulators and bragging about how easy it was to manipulate Helios when I was gone. The world turned on her instantly, but I wasn't done yet. I personally visited her lawyer's office and offered her one final blow: step away quietly, retract her accusations, and disappear, or face lawsuits that would leave her penniless. For the first time in years, Vanessa looked defeated. Truly defeated. Gone was the venom in her eyes. She signed the agreement. I watched her hands shake as she slid the papers back to me. It was over, but victory tasted bitter. That night, after returning to my office, I sat in the dark. I had won, again. Yet something gnawed at me. The woman who had once been my friend was now reduced to nothing. And somehow, I felt empty. I glanced around at the empire I had saved, built, and defended. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, all I saw was a battlefield filled with broken allies and shattered enemies. I had become everything I once hated: Ruthless, paranoid, alone. Still, there was no turning back. The business world didn't reward softness. It rewarded survivors. And I was still standing. I poured a glass of whiskey, stared at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window, and whispered to myself, "You chose this, Evelyn. Queens don't get happy endings. They get power." The war was over. But peace? Peace was never part of the plan. The dust had settled. Vanessa was gone, humiliated and forgotten by the same industry that once applauded her. My enemies were vanquished. Helios stood tall, more powerful and profitable than ever before. I should have felt victorious, unstoppable. But what greeted me each morning wasn't triumph. It was silence. The war was over, yet the battlefield inside me remained. Every day became mechanical. Wake up, meetings, acquisitions, power plays, victory after victory came, yet none of them thrilled me anymore. The rush of crushing rivals had faded. The adrenaline of plotting and scheming disappeared. What remained was routine and an unnerving emptiness. I had become the queen, yes, but my kingdom felt cold. Without enemies, there were no battles to win. Without battles, there was no purpose. My office, once a war room filled with urgent voices and burning ambition, now felt like a tomb. At night, the silence was deafening. I had no friends left, no family I spoke to, no lover to share the victories or the burdens. I lived in penthouses with glass walls, ate at tables set for one, and fell asleep to the hum of city lights that couldn't drown out the loneliness. People still feared and respected me. Shareholders called me a genius. Employees addressed me as Ms. Cross with reverence. But I began to notice something else hidden in their eyes. Pity. They saw it, even if I refused to acknowledge it. The Iron Queen who had burned everything and everyone in her path was, at the end of it, all alone atop her throne. I convinced myself it was the price of greatness. Leaders don't make friends, I repeated in my head. Friends create weakness. But deep down, cracks began to show. I found myself hesitating in meetings, zoning out during key negotiations, wondering, not about profits or competitors, but about the version of myself I left behind years ago. Who had I become? There was no one to confide in. My assistant Lily was loyal but careful. My board members remained transactional, offering praise only when shares soared. Even my reflection in the mirror seemed like a stranger. Lines had formed where laughter once lived. My eyes, once sharp and calculating, now seemed tired. I tried distractions, expensive trips, extravagant purchases, private galas, but none filled the void. Each night ended the same way. Me sitting in my office long after everyone else had left, staring into the dark, asking a question I dared not speak aloud. Was it worth it? Everything I did was supposed to bring me peace, justice, vindication. I had dreamed of this moment when I was at my lowest, when Vanessa destroyed me, when the world turned its back. I fought like hell to crawl out of that abyss. But no one warned me that once you climb to the peak fueled by revenge, there's no view waiting. Just cold winds and echoes of battles long past. One particular night, unable to sleep, I pulled up an old folder from years ago labeled Future Vision. It was a presentation I had made when I first joined Helios, bright-eyed and hopeful, outlining ideas for ethical investments, employee well-being programs, and community partnerships. I laughed bitterly as I scrolled through the slides. That version of Evelyn didn't exist anymore. She had been murdered slowly and painfully by every betrayal and every ruthless decision I made on my way to the top. Just then, a knock interrupted my thoughts. It was Lily. She looked hesitant but determined. "Sorry to disturb you, Ms. Cross, but there's something you should see." I gestured for her to continue. She handed me her tablet. On it was a viral video posted anonymously. Employees, former and current, speaking candidly about working at Helios under my rule. Words like cold, fear-driven, and inhuman flashed across the screen. It wasn't malicious. It was honest. They admired me, but they didn't love me. They didn't even like me. To them, I was a machine. Efficient, ruthless, soulless. I dismissed Lily with a thank you, locked my office door, and sat alone watching the video replay on loop. For the first time, I cried. Not loud, not desperate, just silent tears for the woman I once was, and for the life I had built on ashes. The Iron Queen had won every battle. But in doing so, she had become a prisoner of her own making. That night, I didn't make any grand decisions. I didn't draft mission statements or fire anyone. I simply sat there, alone with the realization that the true enemy hadn't been Vanessa or her puppets. It had been my obsession, my refusal to let go, my hunger to prove everyone wrong. That was the cruelest twist of all. I had succeeded. And success, I now understood, could be the most silent and suffocating prison in the world. Yet somewhere deep inside, a flicker of something stirred. Not hope, not yet, but perhaps a whisper of change. I wasn't ready to listen to it fully. Not yet. But for the first time in years, Evelyn Cross wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about redemption. The weeks following the viral video were the most introspective of my life. Each morning, I arrived at Helios and conducted business as usual. Meetings, quarterly reviews, and expansion plans filled my calendar. I wore my armor, tailored suits, measured words, and an impenetrable demeanor. But behind the mask, something had changed. The video haunted me, not because it threatened my position or profits. Those remained untouched. It haunted me because it held up a mirror I had avoided for too long. For years, I believed my ruthlessness was justified, that the pain I inflicted was balanced by the victories I secured, that being feared was as good as being respected. But that video didn't lie. I wasn't respected. I was tolerated. I wasn't admired. I was endured. I wasn't a leader. I was a tyrant. The realization was suffocating. At night, I sat in silence on the rooftop of my penthouse, staring out over the city I once swore to conquer. The lights didn't shine for me. They didn't care who ruled. They simply existed. Constant, indifferent. And so did the people in my company. They woke up, did their jobs, and went home, never thinking twice about the figure perched high above them, pulling every string. I had become invisible to the world while desperately trying to dominate it. One evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Lily, my ever-faithful assistant, stood at my door after hours. Her usual professional tone was gone. She looked human. "Can I speak freely?" she asked. I nodded, intrigued. "You've won everything, Ms. Cross, but why do you look so lost?" The simplicity of her question shattered me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Lily continued, her voice soft yet firm. "People here don't hate you. They're afraid. But they also miss the Evelyn who used to believe in something bigger than control." I sat still long after she left. Her words echoed louder than any boardroom confrontation or hostile takeover. That night, I made my decision. Power had given me victory, but power without purpose was hollow. If I wanted redemption, I had to earn it, not demand it. The next morning, Helios woke up to shockwaves. I called for a global company-wide broadcast. Every office from New York to Tokyo tuned in. My face, devoid of makeup or pretense, filled every screen. For the first time, I spoke not as the Iron Queen, but as Evelyn Cross, the woman who lost her way. For years, I ruled through fear. I admitted openly, eyes steady. I justified cruelty with results. I mistook silence for loyalty, and I ignored the cost of my ambition. Murmurs rippled across the company. I continued. I cannot undo the past, but I can promise a future led not by tyranny, but by trust. Starting today, Helios will change. I unveiled sweeping reforms, anonymous employee feedback channels, revamped HR policies focused on mental health and work life, balance, profit-sharing programs to reward those who built the company alongside me. More importantly, I announced my own departure from day-to-day operations. Effective immediately, I will step back as CEO and transition into a chairman role, I declared. Helios should not be defined by one person's vendetta or ambition. It should be defined by its people. Shock turned into relief. Some clapped, others wept. Across the world, my iron grip loosened, and the company breathed again. True to my word, I handpicked a new CEO from within, someone young, empathetic, and driven by innovation rather than dominance. Watching her step into the role I once fought so ruthlessly for felt strange, bittersweet, necessary. My final weeks at Helios were quiet. The board respected my wishes. The media spun my move as a graceful exit, a redemption arc for Wall Street's most infamous queen. But I didn't care about the headlines anymore. On my last day, I walked through the building alone. No grand farewell parties, no staged speeches, just quiet goodbyes from employees who, for the first time, looked at me not with fear, but with genuine warmth. As I stepped into the elevator for the final time, Lily caught up to me. "You really did it," she said with a smile. "You let go." I smiled back, feeling lighter than I had in years. "No," I corrected gently. I finally moved on. Months later, I found myself living far from the skyscrapers and stock tickers. A quiet coastal town, a modest home, and endless days, without backstabbing meetings or midnight war rooms. I taught at a local business school occasionally, mentoring young minds about ethics, ambition, and balance. Sometimes they asked about Helios, about Vanessa, about the empire I built and nearly lost to my own darkness. I always gave them the same answer. Victory means nothing if you lose yourself in the process. The world had seen Evelyn Cross, the Iron Queen, ruthless, unstoppable. But only I knew Evelyn Cross, the woman who had to burn down her entire kingdom to finally be free. And in that freedom, I found something I hadn't tasted in years. Not power, not revenge, but peace.